Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much for coming on a Saturday morning, and thank you for joining me here in Manchester, in the heart of the world's first industrial city, a city whose confidence and whose extraordinary future we can see in the changing fabric of the urban landscape around us, the mighty towers of Deansgate Square, last week's extraordinary international festival in Manchester. We can see it in the Christie, the hospital whose cancer treatment is now being written, the future of cancer treatment now being written at the vast new Patterson building with new therapies saving the lives of people around the world for generations to come. And this is not and never has been a city for negativity or navel gazing. Indeed, when the University of Manchester's Andrei Geim and Konstantin Novoselov said they were planning to extract a single atom-thick layer of chrysolites from bulk graphite, giving us the, I think I've got that right, giving us the super light, super strong wonder that is graphene. I imagine there were people who had no idea what difference it could make to their lives, and I imagine there are people in this audience who frankly have no idea. But we stand today on the cusp of the graphene age, with applications in everything from de-icing of aircraft wings to life-saving medicine. And the story of those pioneers is told here at this Science and Industry Museum, and it is one of the countless tales of Mancunian pioneers, because time and again, when the cynics say something cannot be done, Mancunians find a way to get on and do it. And the centre of Manchester, like the centre of London, is a wonder of the world. But just a few miles away from here, the story is very different. Towns with famous names, proud histories, fine civic buildings, where, unfortunately, the stereotypical story is, over the last few decades, of long-term decline. Endemic health problems, generational unemployment, downhill areas. And the story has been, for young people growing up there, of hopelessness or the hope that one day they'll get out and never come back. And insofar as that story is true, and I'm afraid it sometimes is, the crucial point is it isn't really the fault of the places, and certainly isn't the fault of the people growing up there. They haven't failed. It's we, us, the politicians who have failed. Our politics has failed them. And time and again, they have voted for change. But for too long, politicians have failed to deliver what is needed. And our plan now in this new government that I lead is to unite our country and to level up. And I want to explain now what I mean by that. And I'm absolutely not here to tell you, Mr. Mayor, and others, I'm not here to tell you that London has all the answers or that everywhere should be like London or indeed like Manchester. Each place in our country has a unique heritage, a unique character and a unique future. And indeed, I recognise that when the British people voted to leave the European Union, they were not just voting against Brussels, they were voting against London too, and against all concentrations of power in remote centres. So I'm not here to say that Manchester or London are the templates for other places, but I do believe there are lessons to be learnt from the success of cities like these. Because I remember, you all look very young and thrusting, but I remember London in the 1970s, and it was stuck in post-war gloom. And between 1951 and 1981, the population of London actually declined. People forget this. The population of London went down by 20%. It was so miserable. And yet, I think you would agree that over the last 20 years, the capital of our country has been utterly transformed. And London is, I would say, I used to say it a lot, the greatest city on earth, with the exception of Manchester, with the largest... with the largest concentration of tech companies, artists, financial services, top-class restaurants, and all the rest of it. And you can see, we all can see the same thing happening now here in this incredible city. So I want to set out what I think are the ingredients for the success of the UK and the places we call home, whether it's our cities or our towns, our coastal communities, or rural areas. And there are four things I think we need to get right. And first of all, it's basic livability. The streets need to be safe. There need to be enough affordable homes. There need to be jobs that pay good wages. There need to be great public services supporting families and helping the most vulnerable. Second thing, connections. That means, of course, great broadband everywhere. It means transport. Because inspiration, innovation, cross-fertilization between people, literally or figuratively, cannot take place unless people can bump into each other, compete, collaborate, invent, and innovate. So we need literally, spiritually, to unite Britain. And that means boosting growth and bringing our regions together. And the third thing that places need is culture. And Manchester absolutely leads the world in this. And people love the arts, the entertainment here, football, music, heritage, creative industries that make it such a lively, wonderful place to live and work. And we need to help places everywhere to strengthen their cultural and creative infrastructure, the gathering places that give a community its life. And finally, fourth thing, places need power and a sense of responsibility and accountability. And taking back control doesn't just apply to Westminster regaining sovereignty from the EU. It means our cities and counties and towns becoming more self-governing. It means people taking more responsibility for their own communities. And London and Manchester have boomed partly because they have had mayors. Some better than others, I would say, but all I make no comment on the president, but all with the power, the vital power to speak for their cities, to bang heads together and to get things done. And there are lessons from London and Manchester: livability, connectivity, culture, and power. And the first condition of livability is, of course, making these streets safer. And with recorded crime up in the northwest 42%, I think you'd agree it's time we got that down, and we will. And yesterday I met 20 new officers in Birmingham who are graduating after 15 weeks training, and they will join our brave and formidable police men and women who will be putting their lives on the line for our safety. But you want more of these policemen and women on the streets, and so do I. And that's why I've committed to another 20,000 over the next 3 years, and their recruitment will begin in earnest in the next few weeks. And a new national policing board, chaired by our dynamic Home Secretary, will hold the police to account for meeting this target. We will also give the police greater ability to use stop and search in order to drive a reduction in the violent crime that plagues our communities. But there's no point in arresting, charging, and convicting criminals if we do not give them the sentences they deserve. In fact, the number of offenders with more than 50 previous convictions who were convicted but spared jail rose from 1,299 in 2007 to 3,196 in 2018. So we need to restore the public's faith in our criminal justice system by ensuring that people who repeatedly commit crimes are punished properly. And that means that those guilty of the most serious violent and sexual offences are required to serve a custodial sentence that reflects the severity of their offence. And it's only by making the streets safer that you can create the neighbourhoods where people want to live. And one of the biggest divides in our country is between those who can afford their own home and those who cannot. And this is a long-term problem which all governments have failed to fix. Under the previous Labour government, house building had fallen to levels not seen since the 1920s. So we will review everything, including planning regulations, stamp duty, housing zones, as well as the efficacy of existing government initiatives. And we will emphasise the need for beauty, to build beautiful homes that people actually want to live in, and being sensitive to local concerns. And then, of course, if you're going to create great neighbourhoods, safe streets, allow people to own their own homes, you need great public services to make that possible. And that's why I have committed to delivering the funding promised to the NHS by the previous government in June 2018, and to ensure this money goes to the frontline services as soon as possible. This will include urgent funding for 20 hospital upgrades and winter readiness, and proposals drastically to reduce waiting times for GP appointments. The NHS represents a sacred promise between the state and its citizens, a promise that says we will protect and support one another when we are at our poorest and most vulnerable. And the same should go for every other great service of well-being, particularly social care. Many people who have worked hard all their lives have had to struggle with the financial burden of care in their final years, and they're being forced to sell their own homes. And the British people cannot understand why the health service is able to provide the same care for everyone, regardless of income, and yet the social care system cripples those with savings. And for too long, I think politicians have simply kicked this can down the road. I want you to know that can kicking stops now. So I've promised to find a long-term solution to social care once and for all. And that is what we will do, with a clear plan that will give every older person the dignity and security they deserve. And at the same time, we will give every child the world-class education they deserve, which is why we will increase the minimum level of per pupil funding in primary and secondary schools and return education funding to previous levels by the end of this Parliament. And we cannot afford any longer the chronic underfunding of our brilliant FE colleges, which do so much to support young people's skills and our economy. We have a world-class university sector. In fact, I think this has got the biggest concentration of higher education anywhere in Europe, right here in this city. Why should we not aspire to the same status for our further education institutions and to allow people to express their talent? And of course, if you're going to allow people to express their talents properly, then you need proper connectivity. And I get to this absolutely crucial point. If you're someone with a bright idea, or you're running a fantastic business, and you can't get the internet connection you need, and you're spending an eternity staring at the pizza wheel of doom on your screen, then you won't be able to get your idea off the ground, and you won't be able to grow your business, and you won't be able to find customers. And you can have all the talent in the world. But if you're a young kid growing up in a deprived town with intermittent transport, and you can't get to the places where the jobs are, then you won't have the opportunities that you deserve. But when people are able to meet each other and to compete with each other and challenge each other, spark off each other around the water cooler or elsewhere, that's when you get the explosion of the flash of creativity and innovation. And that is what we are going to make happen, not just here, but across the country. First, we're going to invest in fibre rollout, and indeed, we've just completed the build of a large fibre cable between Manchester and York alongside the Transpennine Railway route. This interconnects the Manchester and Leeds internet exchanges and strengthens the internet infrastructure for the Northern Powerhouse. And I'm delighted to see my friend Jake Berry sitting in the Cabinet expressing this government's commitment to the Northern Powerhouse. And just before coming here, I met Barry White, who's there, at, I think, Pomona. Where were we? We were at the Pomona Junction, or the Pomona Station. On the Metrolink, looking at a huge, great stretch of new tramway, which will link up to Northern Powerhouse Rail. And I want to be the Prime Minister who does with Northern Powerhouse Rail what we did for Crossrail in London. And today, I am going to deliver on my commitment to that vision with a pledge to fund the Leeds to Manchester route. And I know that's the bit, Mr. Mayor, that you particularly want. But I want to stress it's going to be up to local people to decide what comes next. And as far as I'm concerned, that is just the beginning of our commitments and our investments. We want to see this whole thing done. And I've tasked officials to accelerate their work on these plans so that we are ready to do a deal in the autumn. And feel free to applaud if you thank you. That's the spirit. That's the spirit. It's the right thing. It's the right thing to do, and it's time we got this whole thing moving. It's time we put some real substance into the idea of Northern Powerhouse Rail. That's why we're here this morning. We want to inject some pace into this so that we can unlock jobs and boost growth. But I know that people can't wait, and they want to see change fast. They want change now. It takes a while to build a railway, believe me. They want reliable, everyday services so that the 18-year-old in Rochdale, just starting out as an apprentice, know that they can get into Manchester for 8 o'clock each morning, so people can get out and about in the evening for a drink or a meal, boosting local businesses and growth. That's services within cities, not just between cities. Services that mean people don't have to drive. Services that don't just give up at the end of the working day. So I'm going to improve, with your help, the local services which people use every day. And I want that to start now, with improvements that can happen in the short term. And that means buses. And I know a lot about buses. Believe me. I love buses. I helped to invent a new type of bus. It's very beautiful it is. So I will begin as a matter of urgency the transformation of local bus services starting here today in Manchester. And I will work with the Mayor of Manchester on his plans to deliver a London-style bus system in the area. Under powers we gave him, you, Andy, in the Bus Services Act. I want higher frequency, low emission and zero emission buses, more bus priority corridors, a network that's easier to understand and use. I want local partnerships between the private sector which operates the buses and a public body which coordinates them. In London, where we have all these things, bus passenger journeys have risen by 97% in 25 years. In other metropolitan areas where they don't, it has fallen, ridership has fallen by 34% over the same period. And I think we can see the first results here in Manchester within a few months. And I want the same for any other part of the country where local leaders want to do it. And good bus connections, good transport connectivity is also vital for so many of the towns that feel left behind. And this may come as a surprise to some, but not everyone wants to live in one of our great cities. Too many places, towns and coastal communities, don't feel that they're benefiting from the growth and the dynamism that we've seen elsewhere in the UK economy. Now, I reject the ridiculous idea that everybody should have it as their ambition to get on their bikes and move to the city. Our post-industrial towns have a proud, great heritage, but an even greater future. Their best years lie ahead of them. So we're going to put proper money into the places that need it. We'll start by ensuring there is investment from central government by bringing forward plans on the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. And we're going to have growth deals as well for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. And we're going now to have a £3.6 billion Towns Fund supporting an initial 100 towns so that they will get the improved transport and the improved broadband connectivity that they need. And they'll also get help with that vital social and cultural infrastructure, from libraries and art centres to parks and youth services. The institutions that bring communities together, that give places new energy and new life. And finally, of course, there is an even more radical shift that we need to make now to deliver all this. And I have seen myself the changes that you can bring about in towns and cities and regions when local people have more of a say over their own destinies. And I don't think that when the people of the UK voted to take back control, they did so in order for that control to be hoarded, smog-like, in Westminster. So we're going to give greater powers to council leaders and to communities. We're going to level up the powers offered to mayors so that more people can benefit from the kind of local government structures seen in London and here in Manchester. We're going to give more communities a greater say over changes to transport, housing, public services and infrastructure that will benefit their areas and drive local growth. And in doing so, we will see to it that every part of this country sees the benefits of the potentially massive opportunity that will come from Brexit. And I think over the last 3 years, we've tended to treat Brexit like some impending adverse weather event. But I campaigned to leave the EU because I believe it's a chance to change the direction of the UK and make us the best country in the world to live. And thank you. And we should remind ourselves that leaving the EU is a massive economic opportunity to do things we've not been allowed to do for decades, to rid ourselves of some bureaucratic red tape, to create jobs, to untangle the creativity and innovation for which Britain is famous. And of course, we don't need to wait now to start preparing to seize the benefits of that project. So we'll begin right away to create the free ports that will generate thousands of highly skilled jobs and revitalise some of the poorest parts of our country. We'll begin right away on working to change the tax rules to provide extra incentives to invest in capital and research. We will double down on our investment in R&D. We'll accelerate the talks on those new free trade deals and prepare an economic package to boost British business and lengthen this country's lead as the #1 destination in Europe for overseas investment. And at the same time, we will unite and level up across our country, as I say, with infrastructure, with better education, and with technology. And in so doing, we will make our whole nation not just an all right, okay kind of place, better than average place to live, but I don't think it sounds hyperbolical to say this, but the greatest place on earth, the greatest place to live, to raise your family, to send your kids to school, the greatest place to start a business, to invest, to have a life. And we're better than Manchester. We're better than the Science and Industry Museum to set out our ambition for doing so. Here today, we can look back at centuries of progress, the inventions, ideas, and breakthroughs, I think including one behind me. That's it, yes, there it is. That came out of Manchester, came out of the North, and came out of the UK and shaped the world we know today. And I just want you to imagine what would happen if we were to, what it would be like, I should say, if we were to reconvene this session now, 30 or 40 or 50 years hence, and what treasures this museum might hold then. I think, I'm absolutely certain there would be displays celebrating the dawn, not of the railway age, but the dawn of, that would still be there, obviously, but there would be the dawn of a new age of electric vehicles. Not just cars or bicycles, but electric planes. Electric planes. That's happening already. Made possible with battery technology being developed now in the UK. We will see tributes and dioramas commemorating the men and women who used new gene therapies to cure the incurable and achieve what had hitherto been thought impossible. And here in Manchester, the home of the world's first passenger railway, I think that's Stephenson's rocket, isn't it? Yeah. It is. With Stephenson's rocket just behind me, we should remember that there were people back then. When was it, Stephenson's rocket? 1829. There were people in 1820. Thank you, Lady Archer. Lady Archer, they got it right. There were people in 1829 who thought that the whole project should be abandoned as a danger to public health because the speeds that were being proposed would be intolerable for the human body. Do you remember that? There were doubters and skeptics and naysayers. They did. That's what they said. The doubters and skeptics and naysayers were there in abundance in 1829 when Stephenson came up with his plan. So I imagine that in the future in this wonderful museum there will be exhibits recording not only the breakthroughs in bioscience here in Manchester and elsewhere that allow the UK to lead the world in producing genetically modified crops, blight-resistant potato, that will feed the world, but also a memorial to the skeptics and the doubters, complete with bioengineered edible paper with which they were forced to eat their words. And I don't blame them, by the way. I don't blame the doubters and the skeptics. But all I will say is that the evidence is behind us. That is Stephenson's rocket. We're now sending rockets into space, and we will. We will expand our space program as well. I don't blame the doubters and the skeptics. It's a natural human instinct. But time and again, they have been proved wrong. Because, and I think they will be proved wrong again. Because if we unite our country, as I say, with better education, with better infrastructure, with an emphasis on new technology, then this really can be a new golden age for the UK. And time and again, Manchester has shown the UK that anything is possible, and time and again, this extraordinary country has actually delivered the same message to the world. And that is what we are going to do once more. Thank you very much for coming and for listening. Right. I have a very strict agenda now, and I'm going to go first to Barry White from Transport for the North, who was kind enough to host me this morning. Barry.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for the commitment to the Leeds-Manchester line, which is one of 7 lines in Northern Powerhouse Rail that the transformational network that the leaders of the North have unanimously backed and approved. So we are delighted to hear about the commitment to Leeds-Manchester, but what we're asking government for, and have asked government for, is that commitment to the whole network,
yes.
the 39 billion, several lines of which can be built at one time. So we want to have Liverpool, Sheffield, Hull and Newcastle all getting the benefit, as well as Leeds and Manchester.
Thank you, Barry. Well, there you go, 39 billion, a number to conjure with, I dare say. But you're absolutely right, Barry, and you're right in your aspiration, and we support that. And you'll have heard what I've said this morning. The commitment that we have made to the Leeds to Manchester section is just the beginning. We will back it all the way. We want to, but we will work with local leaders to make sure that their priorities are fully satisfied as we proceed. But clearly, this is a fantastic scheme that we want to progress as fast as possible. I'll go to Henry Murrison from the Northern Powerhouse Partnership.
Thank you. I think that answer is really helpful, Boris. My question was going to be about Bradford's. So you talked about those places that maybe haven't done as well from the last decades as others have done. And that is one of the cities that could benefit from the new line between Leeds and Manchester, which could go through the city centre. How do you think that cities like Bradford would benefit in terms of homes and jobs from this scheme? Because clearly the point of building the railway isn't so people can ride the trains, but so they can get the opportunities that you mentioned in your speech.
Absolutely. And I believe so passionately in mass transit because it is the best way to allow people on modest incomes to get to the opportunity areas wherever they are. And it works. And in London, the intensification of opportunity was so massive from the middle of the 19th century onwards because they came up with the idea of putting trains in tunnels. And then there was the development of the bus routes in the last couple of decades, which has really turbocharged the London economy. So in the interim, before we get to the full Northern Powerhouse Rail, that's why I place so much emphasis on buses. I really think they can be transformational. And I think it was Peter Hendy, my former colleague at Transport for London, who used to say there's almost no transport problem that can't be solved by a single-decker bus. It may sound banal, but it's true. There are fantastic things you can do by improving the bus network. So in the short term, Bradford will benefit from Northern Powerhouse Rail, as I've said, but buses is the way forward in the short term as well. Let's go to Sam Coates of Sky News.
Sam Coates, Sky News. Prime Minister, you're claiming that you can deliver a revolution today, by the sounds of it. On Wednesday, you spent billions on education. Yesterday, you spent billions on the police. Today, you spent billions and billions and billions. With not much money in the Treasury, with no majority in Parliament, and with a lot of the things that you're talking about actually devolved issues, how on earth are you going to deliver on your promises? And one more thing, you often attack pessimists. Isn't that really an attack on the free speech that you claim to support?
No, come on. Right, well, sorry. serious point first. Sam, and thank you. Actually, the plans that we're announcing, I think, have been pretty reasonable. Everybody knows there is fiscal headroom for the education spending. I don't think anybody wants to see. I think the police spending is widely applauded and supported. And yes, we want to go ahead with Northern Powerhouse Rail. I think the return on investment for this country will be colossal. And if you want to drive economic growth, if you want to create for business the platform that gives them the certainty to invest, then you need fantastic public infrastructure. That is the way to do it. And when London put in Crossrail and London put in the tube upgrades as we did in 10 years ago, and we began that whole project, we did it in the knowledge that it would add massively to the GDP, not just of London, but of the whole country. And that is, I believe with absolute conviction that this is the right thing to do now for the whole of the Northern Powerhouse. And that is why we're going to proceed, because it makes sound economic sense. And Sam, I said at the outset, oh no, I didn't, I said at the end of my speech, come to think of it, I think, of course, it's a natural human instinct to be anxious and to be skeptical, just as people were anxious in 1829 about the terrifying velocities that would be attained by that machine. But I think they were wrong. I think people would. Well, actually, no. The Secretary of the Board of Trade was run over, wasn't he? On day. He was right. Actually, but overall, Huskisson unfortunately paid the price. But overall, that won't happen to the current Secretary of the Board of Trade. He's going to do a brilliant job. Overall, President of the Board of Trade, I should say, overall, the fears were unfounded and technological optimism was seen to be justified, and it will be justified in the future. But I in no way intend to try to crush dissent or scepticism of any kind. Hang on. Vicky Young, please. Vicky.
Young, BBC News. Surely the reason that people are sceptical or pessimistic about politicians and their promises is because many of the people sitting here have heard warm words about the Northern Powerhouse for 5 years and have had really absolutely no progress whatsoever. You talk about fiscal headroom. Lots of people think that should be there for a no-deal Brexit. Are you really going to have the money for that and all of these other pledges that you've made?
Well, the answer to that is yes. I mean, I think the answer to your point about the Northern Powerhouse. I mean, you're right, Vicky, to raise the question. I think people have started to wonder: are we going to see some real delivery for the Northern Powerhouse? And the reason I'm here, and the reason I'm wearing this badge, is because I really do want to help deliver, and I want to help local people deliver it. I think it's a fantastic idea, it's a fantastic project, and its time has come. And on the no deal, the risk of a no deal Brexit, or the prospect of a no deal Brexit, well, we've just got to get ready for it. I don't think that's where we'll end up, but as I've told our European friends, we are going to prepare very actively for that eventuality, in the high confidence that this is an amazing country and that we'll get through it if we need to. And I go now to Paul Brand of ITV.
Prime Minister, on that last point, if it comes to it, can you name one single economic benefit to the north of England of a no-deal Brexit?
In the end, actually, the ability to do things differently, the ability to have free ports, the ability to regulate differently, to turbocharge your bioscience sector, the ability to raise your investment allowances so that businesses can write off more of their R&D against their tax. These are fantastic things, and we should get on with it. Now, look, my friends, I do not want a no-deal Brexit. That is not where we're aiming. But we have to face the fact that at the moment we're being told, as we've been told for the last 3 years, that rien ne va plus, the deal is fixed and can't be changed. I doubt that, but with confidence and friendship to our European partners, we're going to continue with the discussions, and we're going to get ready to come out on the terms that are necessary. And I think actually the people of this country would rather get on with it and come out on October the 31st, in my view. People of this country would rather get on with it and come out on October the 31st, in my view. to get ready to come out on the terms that are...
Predecessor also had the idea of going to northern towns and cities and campaigning to perhaps win the support of people who voted Leave and perhaps people who traditionally voted for the Labour Party. In the end, she didn't win their support en masse. I just wonder why you think you'll succeed where she failed.
Well, I'm going to be... I'm campaigning, obviously, I've got to get Brexit over the line on October the 31st, I believe I may have mentioned before. But we're going to be, our party, the Conservative Party, wants to unite the country and deliver for everybody in this country, and that's our programme. And I'll be zooming around across all corners of the UK. I'm going to go to Jen Williams of the Manchester Evening News.
Hi. I just wondered whether, given that you're making the speech in a Labour city, whether this is effectively you parking your tanks on Jeremy Corbyn's lawn, because the speech that you just made could really have been made by any Labour leader over the last 20 years, perhaps Corbyn aside, but it did sound rather Labour. Thanks.
Well, I take that as I actually don't think Jeremy Corbyn could have said anything of the kind, because unfortunately he is, as you know, committed to the absolute destruction of the wealth-creating sector of society. And he would raise taxes on income, on inheritance, on pensions, on corporations up to the highest level in Europe, if not the world. This is not my agenda. I believe in the balance and symmetry at the heart of the UK economy. I believe in a fantastic, innovative, dynamic, wealth-creating sector here in Manchester that will help us to fund incredible projects such as Northern Powerhouse Rail. All I hear from the Labour Party is a desire to whack up taxes and do things at the behest of the unions, and that is not my type of politics. I want a campaign for modern conservatism, which believes in the fundamental balance at the heart of the UK economy, between the great free market, dynamic, wealth-creating sector, capitalism. How about that? Capitalism, balanced by and supported and made possible by fantastic infrastructure and public services. That's the agenda. Where have we got to? Danielle Sheridan of the Daily Telegraph.
Is it just the backstop that you want to see removed, or are there other aspects of the previous deal that you would like to get rid of? And also, do you feel like the European leaders are warming to you, or are they just going to let you walk away?
Look, thank you, Daniel. I think the answer to that is if we get rid of the backstop, whole and entire, then we're making a lot of progress. That would be my answer. And as for whether my friends across the channel are warming to me, well, I've always had very good relations. I'm sometimes slightly mystified by some of the obiter dicta that I read, and some of the off-the-record commentary that I see. I have very friendly relations with other EU foreign ministers already, and with EU leaders as well. And we will build on them. And I want to stress to everybody that the approach of the UK government is not going to be disengaged or aloof or waiting for them to come to us. We are going to try to solve this problem. But of course, and we're going to do it in a spirit of friendship and cooperation. But Danielle, your point is the right one. We can't do it as long as that anti-democratic backstop, that backstop that seeks to divide our country, divide the UK, remains in place. We need to get it out, and then we can make progress, I think. Anyway, everybody, thank you all very much for your kind attention this morning. I think that brings this morning's proceedings to a close. Thank you. Thank you.